Oh my god, cinemas are open. And Wonder Woman 84 is out. There's no time to waste. I must prepare myself for the cinema. Well, I don't think the tiara was necessary, but I don't hate it. Oh, cinemas are closed again. Oh, no, my mistake. They're dead forever. If only there was a hero who could save them. Well, it's not going to be Wonder Woman. It's here. It's finally here. And by here, I mean there. There, on HBO Max. Like every other film ever coming out ever again. Except this time people don't seem too mad about it. I wonder why. Look, I'm being a bit glib, but honestly, I actually did see this in cinemas before things locked down over here again. And I kind of had to think about it because, at the time at least, I felt very differently to how most critics were talking about this film. You know, until the critics changed their mind and came to their senses, I guess. And it was weird because I had to sit back and go, oh, maybe I'm wrong with this film. I'm going to give this a second watch. Maybe it'll change my mind. That's right, I've now seen this film twice, which is 5 hours for those keeping count. So let's get that complaint out of the way. This film is way too long. So in 2017 when Wonder Woman came out, I think the reactions were maybe a little bit overblown, but I did think it was a really great film. In fact, it was my favourite DCU film at the time. But the big complaint I had, and pretty much everyone else had, was that we got this weird CGI big action set piece ending that didn't really suit the movie. And I think here they might have course corrected to say, okay, well, they didn't like that big action scene, so let's put no action in, or certainly a lot less action. And now we find in this film if the other elements are strong, but they're really not. And that's kind of a big misstep. I mean, some of the action here they have is good, but it doesn't make up for the weak other elements. For example, the opening scene in the mall is excellent in my opinion. It felt really aspirational, which is exactly what a superhero should be. I mean, it was cheesy and campy, but in a fun way. I mean, it genuinely moved me for a sec, and it just made me think back to when I was 10 years old seeing Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. It reminded me of Donner's Superman and just why I fell in love with superhero cinema to begin with. But why does the cheesiness and the campiness work here and not later in the film, is what most people are going to ask. And it's very simple. It's because here the story isn't important. The film has just started. And all the story we need there is Wonder Woman good, bad guys bad, she'd kick ass, save day. Cheesiness in film is just a tightrope walk. You can fall onto one side, which is self-parody, or you can fall onto the other one, which means you're falling into lazy and at times nonsensical writing. And unfortunately, Wonder Woman 84 falls onto this side. Now I've seen some people suggesting it's trying to be one of those 80s films that's so campy and silly that it's kind of so bad it's good. But number one, that doesn't excuse poor writing, and number two, some of the greatest films of all time were released in the 80s, so why are you just going for the schlocky crap? So, in my opinion, whatever they were going for, this doesn't work. So slight spoilers as we get into the story, but basically our plot revolves around a magical gem that can grant wishes, but it works sort of like a monkey's paw.
It is a monkey's paw dating back to Alal bin Abdallah. It has the power to grant wishes to its owner.
Yeah?
I must strongly advise you do not purchase this. Behind every wish lurks grave misfortune.
Come on, pal, I don't want to hear your life story. Paw me!
Which leads to serious ramifications for Wonder Woman, our two villains, and the world as a whole. For Diana, it means she can wish to have her true love Steve Trevor back. For Barbara Minerva, played by Kristen Wiig, it means she can wish to be more like Diana. And for crooked businessman Maxwell Lord, played by Pedro Pascal, it means he can wish to wield unmeasurable power. Let's talk about those two villains for a sec. Kristen Wiig plays Kristen Wiig. Well, okay, Kristen Wiig plays Barbara Minerva, who just happens to be very like Kristen Wiig. Now, obviously this character does go through a transformation, and that does give Wiig a chance to kind of flex her acting muscle later on, but it's just kind of too little too late, in my opinion. I mean, and I do mean too little too late, I will come back to that. Like, it's not her fault either. The writing is just bad, for one, and number two, like, this character doesn't work. This is the same character we've gotten before. It's Jim Carrey in Batman Forever.
Kill the bat!
Jamie Foxx in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
A world without Spider-Man.
You know, those great films. Her relationship with Diana, which should be pivotal, is just barely a thing. I mean, even that aside, we've seen this character a million times before. It's that zero to hero or zero to villain story, you know? And it feels like at times they're doing it very slowly and not giving her a lot of screen time to maybe set it up for a future installment. But no, they're just like, hey, wrap it up here. That's her story. And unfortunately, she's just always playing second fiddle to Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord. Which, let's talk about Maxwell Lord. He's an 80s guy.
We can dance. Dun, 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 dun.
He's a sleazy failed businessman who, thanks to the stone, is able to make these sort of Faustian deals where the person will get something but will lose what they value the most. And over time he starts to value power over money, including to the point of him trying to get the power of the American president. A shrewd businessman who makes deals and becomes president.
Awesome. Awesome to the max.
It's hammer to the head level of subtlety. Pedro Pascal is actually pretty great in the film. I mean, he's absolutely chewing the scenery, but I guess he figured, hey, nothing goes with cheese like ham, right? It's a shame, though, that it's sandwiched between two slices of boring white bread. Yeah, that sounds kind of nice. I mean, he fares better than Kristen Wiig as the bad guy, but as, like, the main villain, I just never really found him intimidating. His defining characteristic was basically that he is a single dad and he has a son, which means we get that old trope that I haven't seen in years. The last time I remember seeing it was Liar Liar, where it's like, oh, these office dads don't spend enough time raising their kids, they're missing soccer games and all this shit. And that ends exactly how you think it would.
I am sure your dad just got held up in court again.
I love you more than anything else in the world, Max.
I just realised they literally turned him into a MacGuffin. He's fun to watch, but he's just no good as the villain. His motivation isn't especially clear, aside from he wants power, I guess. And he becomes massively evil out of nowhere. He didn't seem that bad at the start of the movie. But sure, who cares about our villains? This movie is called Wonder Woman. How does our hero get on? I think the general consensus is that Gal Gadot is maybe not a great actress, but they do a good job of playing to her strengths and hiding her weaknesses. And she is fantastic as Wonder Woman. She's just very charismatic and endearing as this character. I mean, she is Wonder Woman, and she absolutely feels it, looks it. She's perfect, and she was a great performance. But what about the character? So first of all, she brings back Steve Trevor, her true love, who she's been mourning for 70 years. Jesus, woman, move on. But they also kind of do some retconning here as well, like she is fighting crime. Apparently they didn't go with the Zack Snyder approach that she just basically sat in her arse for 100 years and then came back for Batman vs Superman for whatever reason. But yeah, she has been fighting crime just kind of in secret. Okay, look, forget about that. We need to go back to the Steve Trevor thing. How does that work? So Steve's consciousness comes back and goes into another person's body. So that person is gone now, I guess. And anytime Wonder Woman sees this person, it looks like Steve to her, but it doesn't look like Steve to anyone else. So basically Wonder Woman is okay with a guy getting brainwashed and taken over. That's not cool. And make matters worse, there's a love scene, which, that's rape there. Okay, well, hopefully she eventually comes to her senses, but no, she kind of consistently refuses to give up Steve, even though it's costing her her powers, making matters much, much worse in the world, and preventing her from stopping the bad guy. Our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just dive into that for a sec. First of all, the Steve return is unnecessary and pointless, which I'll get into in a sec. Secondly, Wonder Woman doesn't come off very heroic or noble here, like, at all. And then finally, the problem of her giving up her powers is that in these movies, her powers are pretty ill-defined. That it kind of undercuts that sacrifice. I mean, her power levels are kind of inconsistent at times, and it feels like genuinely, more than once in this film, they give her an ability just because the plot demands it. But something the plot definitely did not demand was the return of Steve Trevor. Steve was a really great character, and his relationship with Diana in the first film was one of the absolute highlights. He just had great chemistry, and the problem is that his story was complete. And they bring him back to do absolutely nothing with him, and I've seen some people say this is sort of an ironic commentary on how underwritten female love interests often were in 80s movies, but that doesn't excuse it. I mean, it's not good when it happens to someone of either gender. It's just bad writing. And it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they introduce him just so Diana can kind of learn to move on, something which she should have done already, because, you know, it's been nearly 70 years, number one. Number two, it's just not very interesting. It's something that would be better suited to happening off screen. I mean, the only thing they really do with him is give him like these admittedly cute kind of fish out of water moments, like in an inverse of the last film. Like he does his like, you know, his stand-up observational comedy. What's the deal with parachute pants? Aside from that, he's just a pointless inclusion. I mean, the bigger problem isn't that they spend time with him, it's that because of the time they spend with him, they don't get to spend time with other characters. I mean, they spend all this time with a story that's already been concluded and a resolution that's blatantly obvious. Time that could have been spent developing our villains, which was sorely needed. It just didn't feel like they needed to see Trevor in this film. And they also didn't need to set the film in the 80s, by the way. They don't do anything with that, really, aside from, hey, look, it's the 80s. But it's pointless. They don't really tie it into anything. There's not really any generally interesting things to do with the plot that make it necessary for the 80s. So because of that, that's another thing that really wasn't necessary in the film. So you would hope that considering the first Wonder Woman had such a panned ending that this one might be a bit better, but no, it's not really. The ending for this just didn't land. We have a big kind of fight scene with Cheetah, which just... I give Warner Bros. The benefit of the doubt. I thought they might not be showing us what Cheetah looked like because they wanted to see it in the big screen, or maybe it wasn't fully finished, but it would be for the film. And no, it's just, she's barely in the movie, and she's totally shrouded in darkness the whole time to hide bad CGI. It just doesn't work. I mean, I found the fight choreography bland and uninteresting. It just doesn't land, and that's your big action set piece ending, which you sorely needed. It's a shame because there's other action scenes in the film. Like, for example, there's a chase scene earlier on in the film where I felt like the action was quite fluid and dynamic, but here it's just awkward and stilted and just a CGI nightmare. Now, as I said, the lack of action didn't necessarily bug me as much as it did other people, but that I felt like the other elements need to be strong to compensate for that. And the ending of this film is not strong at all. Basically, Wonder Woman finds the bad guy and she talks to the audience about how the world can be a better place, and she tells us what she's learned, like it's an episode of Scrubs or something.
It's amazing how a few simple words can change everything.
You must be the hero.
And then the bad guy just loses. I know they wanted it to be like endearing, which is okay. I mean, for the times we're in, that kind of positivity was a nice change of pace, but it just comes off as really hokey and kind of sanctimonious. I mean, if nothing else, it's just a really underwhelming way to end a blockbuster. She talks the villain to death.
Imagine there's no heaven.
What worked for me was some of the performances. A few of the action beats worked okay. Visually, the film is a bit touch and go. It's okay, but sometimes some of the CGI is a little bit iffy. The soundtrack was overall decent. I mean, the movie in general is sort of fun. But I wasn't bored, but it's pretty mindless. So for all my complaints, why did I doubt myself and say I'd watch the film again before I gave my thoughts? And honestly, I think it's because it's just so rare that we have a movie that's so devoid of any cynicism or negativity. And I found that it kind of touched me at times as a result, even though the story isn't particularly good and the characters aren't really good. It's pretty much not a good movie. I just found it kind of a welcome change of pace, especially after the year we've had. I found it kind of nice to see something so pure and aspirational. Best analogy I can give is that Wonder Woman 84 is kind of like eating ice cream before your dinner. It's dumb and indulgent, and it might be nice, but it'll only leave a fleeting taste of sweetness in your mouth, and afterwards you'll probably want a full meal. You know, you'll go away hoping for something a bit more substantial and just wanting more, and overall you'll probably be unsatisfied. Does that make sense? Why are all my analogies about food? I'm going to get something to eat. This movie was pretty soulless. I could really go for a movie with soul right about now. Soul. I'm reviewing Soul next.